Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk about the new rite of marriage. And joining me in today's show is Father Michael Balash, and it's nice to have you on the show today.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
You know, I think before we get into our discussion specifically on the new rite of marriage, let's give the folks that are with us a little flavor of sacraments in the life of the Church. First of all, what is a sacrament? Why we celebrate sacraments, and in particular, why the Church lifts up marriage as a sacrament.
Well, first of all, as you know, the Church has 7 sacraments. And I think if you were to probably define what a sacrament is, it's an encounter with God. It helps us realize the presence of God in our lives and how God plays a role in our lives. So sacraments happen at particular points in our lifetime that enriches our relationship to God. And the Church raises up these moments as true encounters with the living Christ that help us in our life live as disciples of Christ. Marriage is one of those sacraments. And the reason for that is because marriage helps to reflect the love of God in our lives. I think if you were to ask someone the question, how does God love me as a person? I think the best mirror of that is the love that's shared between a husband and wife in marriage. And for that reason, marriage is a sacrament in the Church.
Let's talk about how we know as priests that sacraments come directly out of the life and the ministry of Jesus. How does the sacrament of marriage, or to use the word matrimony, how does that come out of the life of Jesus? As best I can recall, there's one instance in the Gospel of John, I believe, where Jesus and his disciples are at the wedding feast of Cana. So that's really one of the only type of examples where we talk about Jesus intimately involved with a married couple. But how does this whole sense of marriage and matrimony come out of the life of the Lord and also out of the Scriptures itself?
Well, I think primarily how that happens is that the message of Jesus Christ has always been rooted in love. Love of neighbor, love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the heart of the gospel message. And the love that a husband and wife share between each other is so intimate and so profound that I think it mirrors the type of love that Christ has for the Church, the type of love Christ has for his followers, people, you and me. And it is also a challenge for us to love in the very same way. So I think that love and that expression of love between a husband and wife really helps us to live our life loving in the same way. So I think that's how it comes out of Scripture and it comes out of the life of Jesus Christ.
You know, for us in the Church, we, as you had mentioned earlier, there's 7 sacraments. We celebrate those. How has the Church over the centuries celebrated marriage? Has it changed? Has it grown? In the same way as we celebrate the sacraments in the life of the Church, we've seen how they have changed, at least in the way that we celebrate them. Is this new rite of marriage that we're going to talk about in just a moment, tell us or show us how we get a better understanding of the sacrament in the life of the Church from its very beginning?
Well, one of the challenges when it comes to celebrating the sacrament of marriage in the Church is that of all the 7 sacraments, perhaps marriage is the only sacrament where secular understandings and secular experiences kind of converge together with the religious experience and the sacramental experience. And so there's always been a tension in the church, sometimes good, sometimes bad, on how these two perspectives can be merged together and retain the religious and significance that the sacrament of marriage is. A lot of the traditions that people engage in when it comes to the celebration of marriage really have a secular origin, but somehow they've crept into and been kind of assigned a religious meaning that sometimes isn't all that accurate or really isn't there. Simple things such as the entrance procession and a lot of the trappings of that really have their roots in a secular understanding. In the Middle Ages, it was not uncommon for marriages to be arranged. The father of the bride would meet with the groom and they would work out an arrangement for this marriage. And so the father walking the bride down the aisle, the father being asked who gives this woman in marriage to this man, all of those practices really have a secular origin and really don't have a religious significance. So the challenge the church faces when we're celebrating marriage today, in a religious perspective, is how do we incorporate or allow some of those secular practices to be part of the ceremony without overcoming and overshadowing the religious significance of the ceremony. I think the new order of matrimony and the new rite respects that, but also really kind of puts things into perspective that is going to be helpful.
We're down to about less than 2 minutes of our time together before we go into a break and then get more specific about the new rite. But one thing I'd like us to mention very briefly is, I know as priests oftentimes we use the phrase, I married so-and-so, or I married them. But that's really erroneous. They really marry one another. Briefly explain that theology.
Well, the sacrament of marriage is witnessed by the community and witnessed by the minister. But really, the two people that enact the sacrament in the presence of the church's minister, in the presence of the community at large, is the couple getting married, the man and the woman, the husband and wife. They, in giving each other giving themselves to each other, really then, and by their consent, of surrendering their total self to that person in a relationship that will be everlasting, will be based on fidelity, will be based on mutual and life-giving love, enact and celebrate the sacrament among themselves. The priest, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, the maid of honor, the best man, and the community gathered, we're there to witness that and to celebrate with the couple this profound gift that they give to each other.
We'll talk more about that gift in just a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
Instead of sitting on the couch, I hope to clean up.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I sent my husband a love email.
What have I done for my marriage today? It's a good question.
I gave her a call and say thinking of her and the kids.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
We're going to the museums as a family.
What have I done for my marriage today?
I made my wife coffee and breakfast this morning.
It's going to be her birthday next week, so I've been spending time today making arrangements to make that extra special.
Oh, we're spending the day together.
I bought her an orchid.
Hassan was able to let me sleep in by taking care of him in the morning.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. She's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Small changes can make a world of difference. Get started at foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
I spent 34 years as a teacher. I just loved interacting with the students.
Many sisters, brothers, and religious order priests served for little pay and now their communities lack retirement funds.
My very first class had 56 first graders.
Gifts to the Retirement Fund for Religious help provide for medications, nursing care, and more. Please give to those who have given a lifetime. Donate at your local parish.
God bless you for your help.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Father Michael Balash about the new rite of marriage. I know that that's really not the proper title for the new rite. If you could tell us the proper title, and let's start talking about some of the significant changes in this new rite of marriage.
Okay. Well, the new rite is called the Order of Matrimony. And how this all came about is in 1963 at the Second Vatican Council, when the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy was promulgated, the first document to come out of the Council. One of the mandates was that all of the liturgical books should be revised and translated into English. That happened from 1963 to 1970. But in the rush to get that all out in English and translated, what happened was those books for that time, the rites for that time, were adequate. But then over time, and in the 70s, there was a call to revise the rites. And so all of the rites have been revised probably from 1970 onward. But in 2002, when Pope John Paul was Pope, he issued a document called Liturgicum Authenticum, which basically restructured all of the rules of translation. So all of the books that have been translated probably into their second edition now have to be retranslated into the third edition. That's how we got the Roman Missal in 2011. Right. And the first rite that has been redone under the new rules of Liturgicum Authenticum, in addition to the Roman Missal, is now the Order of Matrimony. So this has been a long time. It takes a long time these days to get all of the rites. And so this is the first of all the rites that will be retranslated and reworked.
Let's talk about some of the things that have changed. We know the language has changed, obviously, since that has been revised with the Roman Missal. So we know the words are different. Are there any other real significant changes in the marriage ceremony? For example, someone who's going to attend a wedding, let's say after September or December or into next year, what will they see different?
Well, I think one of the significant changes is in the questioning of the couple. In the old rite, the priest would ask the couple three questions. Have you come here to give yourselves freely in marriage? Do you understand what you're doing? Will you accept children lovingly from God? And it was the common practice to ask that question to the couple, and they would respond, we have, or we will, or we will. Now, the new rite says that you ask that question, but each person has to respond individually, which I think is significant because it is a statement of their intentions, which I think is important. The actual wedding vows that the couple speaks to one another have primarily remained the same. Some minor word changes. But one thing that is also significant in that rite of marriage, in that part, is right after the exchange of rings, when the priest receives the consent and has said, let what God has joined together, let no one divide. There was always kind of a uncomfortable pause at that moment. No one knew what to do. And what they've inserted is right after that is an acclamation of praise. Thanks be to God, let us praise the Lord, or some acclamation and phrase. That can be sung, that can be recited, but it's a chance for the whole community at that point to acknowledge what they've just witnessed. So I think that's a significant change.
I think one of the things, at least in my experience, and probably in your experience, when we celebrate or preside over weddings, oftentimes the assembly tend to be more in a spectator mode. Even those Catholics that attend Mass on a very regular basis tend to sit back as if they're to be entertained, or they have no participation. How are we going to educate the folks on this new rite? We know specifically how we're going to do that here in our diocese, but how will the Church in general teach people to be more participatory and to be more involved in the love of the sacrament that they're celebrating with their friends?
Well, I think that's something that we have to do as a society, even beyond the Church. A marriage is a tough thing. To maintain a relationship these days as a married couple is becoming more and more challenging. And so I think the community at large, both outside the Church and within the Church, really has to play a role in helping people in their relationship. This new order of matrimony involves the community. In some acclamations that weren't present, it really emphasizes the wedding Mass and the wedding liturgy and how it is a celebration of the Church. It's not just the couple's celebration, but it's a celebration of the Church, and it's a blessed event that the Church is receiving by witnessing this couple's exchange of vows and commitment.
What more in the changes of the rite can we expect when myself as a priest or people who go to a wedding will experience? Any other changes? You had mentioned about the acclamations and the vows and so forth and the questioning. What other significant changes will take place?
Well, there's two cultural adaptations that have been inserted into the rite, and they are Hispanic in nature. And I think this is part because of the large Hispanic influence that is becoming more and more present in our country. That might not be the case locally here, but in different parts of the United States, the Hispanic culture is playing a much larger role in the life of the Church. So the two cultural adaptations that were included in the Spanish Rite that was approved in 2008 and have been added to the English Rite is the blessing and the giving of the Aris, which are the 13 coins, one for each month of the year and then one for charity. And what happens is right after the exchange of rings, the couple exchanges this bag of coins with one another. And if that's part of their culture, if that's part of their heritage, that adaptation can be inserted in the rite at that time. The other Hispanic change that will be significant is the placing of the lazo, or the veil. And that happens right after the Our Father, before the nuptial blessing. When a veil, and that can be a garland of flowers or a cloth veil, is placed around the couple's shoulders together to signify their union with one another. Ironically and surprisingly, what is not included in the marriage rite in this new order, as well as in the previous orders, is the very popular unity candle that a lot of people engage in.
Sure. We'll talk more about that, but we're going to take a quick break. Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I don't train like you.
I don't have the same skin as you.
I don't wear my hair like you.
I don't dance like you.
I don't come from the same place as you.
But I will give you CPR.
When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Father Michael Balash about the new rite of matrimony. Before we took a break, we were just getting into part of the ceremony that I know many couples use, and that's the unity candle, the wedding candle. is that part of the new rite or not?
No, it's not, and it was not part of the old rite. The unity candle is one of those secular things that have kind of crept into the liturgy, and it's one of those challenges where we kind of try to allow the secular and the religious to coexist peacefully. But it really has not ever been part of the rite, and it's not part of the. It wasn't included in this new rite either.
I've often thought when we do the unity candle for weddings, at least weddings that I've celebrated over these many years, it's kind of a way for the moms to get involved, because they have the moms walk up, they light the candle, they blow out this, they light this, so it's kind of, as you say, something to get more people involved, but also to tie the secular into the religious. Are there any other secular things that are part of the old rite that will no longer be part of the new rite that you could think of that might be significant for the folks that are listening?
Not really. Not really. I mean, one of the challenges for the new rite, and one of the challenges that was part of the old rite, was always the entrance procession. I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a celebration of the church. And if you begin to think in that perspective, where it's not just the bride's day or just not the couple's day, but it's the day of the church, the liturgical procession is part of the ceremony. And so there has always been the challenge to make that a liturgical procession. Now, has it happened? Probably not. Will it happen? Probably not. But it's there. It's one of the best practices, and you can only hope and pray that eventually we'll move to that best practice.
And I think another thing that in my reading of the new rite, is that the Gloria is to be part of it. I know we do the Gloria every weekend at liturgy outside of Advent and Lent, but how is that going to play into that, and why is that part of it?
Well, the Gloria is a required element for a ritual mass, for all the rituals, and that was something that was part of the new Roman Missal. And so since this is the first ritual to be revised beyond the Roman Missal, there is a strong emphasis to include the Gloria as part of the wedding ceremony, because it's a ritual mass of the church, and so it's a requirement of all ritual masses. So that is another element that will be added to the new order of matrimony. It happens right as it normally does at Mass, right after the entrance rite, before the liturgy of the Word.
And obviously, some of the words will be different. As we experienced in 2011 with the new translation, we'll have the same thing with the rite of matrimony.
True, but it's not as significant. It's not as significant as it was, or drastic as it was when the new Missal came out. In part, we're kind of used to now the new language, so the new responses for the rite of marriage are the responses that come from the Roman Missal. So it's not too drastic. And again, the actual vows that the couple speaks to one another have minor changes.
Okay. The other thing I think that we should talk about, not just in this new rite of matrimony, but I think in the celebration of the church with couples, is the whole liturgical music. Over the years, at least in my experience, I'm sure in your experience, we've gotten different requests for this song or that song, something that's popular. It's another instance of the secular finding its way in. How do we as church respond to that? And are there regulations for liturgical music for weddings?
There are regulations and requirements. All music that's played at any liturgical celebration has to be praiseworthy. It has to be liturgical and spiritual in nature. And it has to be appropriate. And so, I think what happens in a lot of instances is the more popular music is, for wedding celebration, is kind of played and performed as prelude music. But once the ceremony starts, which includes the procession, it's just common practice and a directive that all of that music within the ceremony needs to be appropriate and liturgical in nature.
One thing that you had mentioned a few minutes ago is that this is the church's celebration. It's not just the couple getting married. It's not just the mother, the bride, and so forth. But how do we as church lift that up to our folks? How do we let them know that every time we gather to celebrate a sacrament, whatever the sacrament is, that we gather as church? It's not just about me. Whether it's matrimony, holy orders, baptism, confirmation, it's the celebration of the church.
Well, I think the best way we do that is by doing it in church. And that is becoming a challenge with weddings that are destination weddings or weddings on the beach or in other places. The church celebrates its moments in church, just as a family celebrates its moments as a family around the dining room table in the dining room. And so whenever the church celebrates and gathers, it's done in church. And so it's the Catholic practice and the Catholic rule that all marriages between Catholics or between a Catholic and a non-Catholic that are to be recognized by the Catholic Church happens in church, because that's where the community celebrates sacraments.
What would we like to tell the folks that are with us to keep in mind in the last few minutes of our time together of what they could do to make that sacrament truly a sacrament of the celebration of the church?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to just constantly remind ourselves, and I think bring to the surface in our life as people as well as members of the church, is the integrity and the respect of the marriage relationship. And I think in our society today, that's maybe being challenged. And so the church, a lot of times people will say, well, the church has all these strict rules about marriage and all these strict rules about getting married and celebrating weddings. I tend to look at those directives and those guidelines not as a hindrance or trying to create anxiety among couples, but more so the church's way of upholding the sacredness, the integrity, and the dignity of this relationship. This is just not something that you do on the fly. The church says that marriage is a commitment that is deep, that is important, that is should be life-giving and everlasting. And so all of the things surrounding the celebration of the sacrament of marriage, I think, helps build that up and enhance that understanding in the church.
Father Michael Balash, thank you so much for being with us. I know that there's more that we will learn as church about the new rite, but thank you for sharing what you did.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.